People say, what's the big deal? You got misidentified as a homosexual person. You're not one. Get over it. And it wasn't really just that. Something that left a lasting effect was being labeled as such for years by certain members of my so-called inner circle because they thought I was a personality disorder, and indeed I was not, and various other sundry items, although I could have those traits, you never know. I think I may just, but bipolar and narcissism looks a lot alike. But it was when I went into my first new experience, let's just say, at a lower level, I got gaslighting. Gaslighting does a really good job of knocking down your boundaries and making you more submissive. And in the process, they were taking away some of the oppositional stuff that I possessed. And they had certain ideas for me that I wasn't kosher with. However little did I know, I was waking up and fighting people out of my bed. And I was also being put in a position where I was very quickly wanting what was going on in my external life to stop. So I was being very quick to agree to just about anything. There were this and that and everything else. And that's what gaslighting is. It knocks down your boundaries, makes you more submissive, makes you more cooperative. And when I went to Compass House the first time, I think it was the first time, yeah, I didn't know what the hell had happened. Basically, why did it happen? Woke up with like my pants down at one point, a couple different times. I can't remember who it was, but somebody came up to me and kind of just mentioned, they gaslighted you. Knocking down your boundaries, making you more submissive, more agreeable. You obsess, it gets into your subconscious, it gets messy, and then you got a problem. And that happened in every single new experience I was at. And it got to the point where, you get that happening to you long enough, it's almost like you want to agree to anything just to get it to stop. And that's why I call it reorientation. To the point where even now, there are times where I have to stop. And that's where a lot of the PTSD issues comes from, because there are points where I have to stop, focus, realize that things in my head are not the way they should be or they seem to be. And I am, in fact, whole and decent and a shell or a portion of who I once was. But if you have that happen long enough, it can literally change a person. Never mind the fact that you could change a codependent person just that way. And if you look it up, don't take my word for it, folks. Look it up. And that's what made me jump to a great mini conclusion by thinking that perhaps a deal had been made or something to that nature, in the sense that I had already been promised to some other little wet behind the nuts, cocksucking wannabe gangster asshole. So that being said, to put this very quite simply, I am doing the best I can in a bad situation. Not a bad situation, the situation is a lot better than it used to be. However, I will never go back to a shelter. And if you knew what it was like to be in the emotional mess that sometimes is my head, you would probably think it a miracle that I hadn't already killed somebody. As somebody said earlier tonight, why haven't you gone insane yet? Well, to put it quite simply, poor choices, good instincts, and great logic. And maybe whiskey, I'm thinking of starting that up again too. But you can literally change a codependent person in that regard. And I know some people are looking at me like, Christopher, you don't know what you're talking about, homie. But the thing is I do. In fact, there was a murder case about 20 years ago because a guy had changed a codependent person. And he ended up getting killed. The guy ended up getting off scot-free. And, sometimes people will be codependent, as in, i.e., they're looking to someone else as a parent and things to that nature. I've been in that experience on both ends of the spectrum, and that can have disastrous consequences, especially on somebody with delayed adolescence. And when I say disastrous consequences, I mean somebody may think that's a funny joke. Somebody may have some sort of sadistic intent or sense of humor. And I'm not talking about anybody in my immediate social circle, especially those closest to me. I'm talking about somebody who may have a sadistic sense of humor. I'm talking about somebody who may think that they're dealing out justice, but you could irrevocably damage someone like that. So you need to be extremely careful when you're playing judge, jury, and executioner. Never mind the fact of making an assumption as to who somebody is and is not, and remembering that at that point or at any particular time, if that person hasn't slept in a fair bit of time, it's very easy for that person to obsess, to freak out, and to jump to conclusions, especially if your intent is not exactly pure, especially if your intent comes from somebody else who is extremely biased, very vindictive, knows more about you at the time than you know about yourself, and doesn't really give a shit whether or not you commit suicide or not. Not saying now, simply saying that at that point in time, that could have been a possibility.